The Las Vegas Sphere has to be one of the most controversial structures ever built. How exactly did we get here? It looks crazy, but we used to build crazy stuff like this all the time. Just look at these images from past World's Fairs. People built tons of lavish buildings adorned with decorative architecture, purely for the spectacle. These events showcase the cutting edge of human ingenuity, incredible building projects designed to draw attention and highlight innovative new technologies. The telephone was introduced at the World's Fair in 1876. So was the world's first television. Even the Golden Gate Bridge was opened at a World's Fair. And then we just seem to stop. Today, we see critical infrastructure and beautiful architecture crumbling around us. We need more ambitious projects. Call it what you want, but it's undeniable that something very ambitious is happening out in the desert. It's hard to think of a piece of architecture that has garnered more attention than the Las Vegas Sphere.
How can this possibly be real?
Sphere is ushering in a new era in Las Vegas.
Mesmerized with the Sphere's outer appearance. When it comes to the MSG Sphere, traffic stops and goes nowhere.
This isn't an accident. Beyond being the largest LED structure in the world, the Sphere represents something bigger about our culture. The Sphere's existence is a narrative violation in the truest sense of the term. But beyond all the hype, there's a story no one is talking about, and it all revolves around the concentrated efforts of one man, James Dolan. This is a deep dive into the man behind the Sphere, the struggles that made him into the magnate he is today, and 3 actionable lessons to take into your business, career, or everyday life. Now, unless you're an extremely dedicated basketball fan, the name James Dolan probably means nothing to you. That low profile is not a mistake. Dolan is notoriously standoffish with the press, and he takes great effort to control the narrative around his work, often to his own detriment. If you've read anything about Dolan, you'll get this portrayal that he's a spoiled rich kid who had basically everything handed to him. While this is mostly a media narrative, it's also kind of true. Let's start with his family history. The story of the Sphere doesn't begin with James, but rather his father, Charles Dolan, or Chuck as he's known. Chuck was a serial entrepreneur, but his break came when he dived deep into the hottest emerging technology of the day, cable television.
Good evening.
All week long we've been talking about
The first question to Senator Kennedy.
KOA in full spectrum color.
With the rise of streaming services, video games, and social media, most young people don't remember how massive the cable business really was. But at one point, cable was the business to be in. It was where the startups of yesterday built their fortunes. Like many, cable was where Chuck Dolan, James's father, staked his claim and built his family's wealth. In 1962, at the age of 36, Chuck Dolan moved to New York and established his first business, Teleguide Incorporated. The venture was an early ad tech play. Advertisers could purchase inventory to get their messages displayed on TVs in all sorts of locations, mainly apartments and hotel rooms. Owners of hot tourist spots could beam their offers to over 44,000 hotel rooms in the greater Manhattan area. This was huge for the time. From this business, he began to build a framework around the flow of information. The ability to pipe in video content from one place to another is extremely valuable. This idea would become the theme of Chuck Dolan's career and make him billions in the process. In the mid-1960s, Chuck took this framework and applied it to a new business venture, but in a more conventional fashion. He founded a cable network called Sterling Manhattan Cable. This was just your typical cable system with no bells and whistles, but it gave Chuck an important foothold into a fast-moving industry with lots of opportunities. Opportunities like underground cable. In September of 1966, Sterling Information Services, Chuck's holding company, partnered with Time Life Incorporated to found Manhattan Cable TV Service, the first underground cable system for the United States. For any cable service today, underground cable is the bread and butter of the business. But at the time, this was a groundbreaking innovation born from regulatory issues. Prior to this, television was delivered via telephone wire, and the reception was usually unreliable, especially in Manhattan with its massive skyscrapers. By putting the cable underground, Chuck was able to effectively deliver service to almost any business or home in Manhattan. But there were 2 massive issues with this plan. 1, putting cable in the ground was insanely expensive. And 2, customers were really slow to adopt the product due to how new and unproven cable was at the time. With dwindling revenue and massive capital expenditures, Chuck needed to make a dramatic change. So in 1969, he merged with Time International to give them more of a stake in Sterling Information Services. That covered the capex to build the underground wires. So what did Chuck do about the low demand? He came up with an idea for a TV channel available to cable subscribers only, building a sense of exclusivity and value around cable. He initially called it the Green Channel, and they aired movies and sports without commercial interruption. What was once the Green Channel is now HBO. You can thank Chuck Dolan for Succession, but we'll get to that later. HBO was a standout success. The channel saved the network and pushed new subscribers to embrace cable. But not everyone was a fan of the service. You have to understand the time. It was the 1970s, and while paid television had been attempted before, this was the first successful iteration. As long as you had a TV and an antenna, you could access all the major broadcast networks for free. So why would you pay for TV? New problems began to emerge on the horizon. First came the regulators. These bureaucrats worried about where they were digging, what they were building, and all the downstream dangers associated with these projects. The FCC had to make sure everything was up to snuff and wound up clogging up every move Chuck Dolan tried to make. Then there was also serious competition from major networks. All this work became a little too much for Chuck, so he decided to take a step back and start a new cable company, Cablevision. He sold both HBO and Sterling Cable Manhattan to Time Life to fund his new operation and put his nose to the grindstone. By this point in Chuck Dolan's story, he's learned the ins and outs of the cable and media business, and so he sets his eyes on a new target, controlling all of Manhattan's cable. Chuck is one of 3 applicants to be awarded cable franchise permits by the city of New York, and effectively has the rights to the island. He controls the sale of cable in every corner of every borough, and begins to build a big bankroll. In 2014, their finances were leaked, and they were making around $6 billion in revenue, $1 billion in operating income, and $3 million in net income. While these numbers are far behind the scale of what they were making back then, Cablevision was an insanely lucrative operation and became the family's piggy bank. They bought everything from mansions and yachts to Madison Square Garden and the 2 teams that play within the arena, the National Hockey League's New York Rangers and the National Basketball Association's New York Knicks, who we'll get to in a second. And here's where we get to Chuck's son, James Dolan, the guy who actually built the Las Vegas Sphere. With lots of money from day one, James grew up with odd incentives. When you have everything handed to you on a silver platter, what else is there to do? What gives you purpose? With all this leisure time, James became an expert sailor. Throughout his youth, he would take these massive excursions, at one point taking a 70-foot, 12-man sailboat from Cape Town, South Africa to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. James was a master of sailing and became deeply embedded within sailing culture and, by extension, drinking. He attests that he never drank while actually sailing, but his on-land antics were enough to raise some eyebrows. James would frequent the yacht clubs and get torn up. As James put it in his own words, the whole sailboat/yacht racing culture was around alcohol. You go out on the boat and you come back and get trashed at the yacht club with your pink pants and Izod shirt. Eventually, James' drinking habit became such an issue he had to check himself into a rehab center in 1993. He's been sober ever since, and this is a personal point of pride for him. Aside from sailing, Dolan had a deep interest in music. After high school, James pursued a career in professional music, but eventually called it quits and enrolled in college to get a communications degree. From there, he began to learn the inner workings of the family business through sales positions and eventually an assignment to launch a sports radio station in Cleveland, Ohio. James got a crash course on everything Cablevision and began getting involved in the fight for the family business. If you remember earlier, the media always depicted James as some snobby rich kid. While that doesn't seem that far from the truth, he did have a chip on his shoulder and a fire in his belly. He wanted to prove himself, show everyone that he had solid business acumen too.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year!
In 2003, satellite TV was all the rage. Shows like American Idol, Survivor, and Friends ruled the airwaves, and there were tons of new companies looking to make bank on a better delivery system than cable. Market entrants like DirecTV and Dish had popped up in '94 and '96 respectively, and were eating up slices of the pie. His dad Chuck noticed this and started investing heavily into satellites under a new project called Voom. James didn't buy the hype though, and thought it would be better to invest in actual entertainment. It drove a rift between James and his brother Tom, who was being groomed to inherit the business and had been embracing satellite to appease his father. They would argue round and round about this topic. It all came to a head during a meeting with the board of directors at a restaurant in New York City. Tempers flare, the atmosphere is tense, and the question on everyone's mind is who is ready to take the lead. It's basically an episode of Succession. After the dust settles, the board made their decision and sided with Tom and the satellite TV strategy. Voom is funded and progress is underway. Rocket launches, infrastructure, the works, billions of dollars spent. And in the end, it all fails. The internet proved to be a bigger opportunity, and Voom was doomed from the start. The project loses $600 million in a single year and gets shuttered in 2005. They sell what remains of the division to EchoStar Communications, Dish's parent company, for $200 million. While disastrous for the company as a whole, this utter failure puts James in a new light. He's not just some rich kid, he's a rich kid with wit. This new light emboldens him to take bigger swings, and James begins to dive into entertainment. Now, remember how I said the family purchased Madison Square Garden? This becomes James Dolan's pet project. If you don't know, MSG is much more than a single physical building. MSG Entertainment is a parent company that owns a ton of stuff. Radio City Music Hall, the New York Rangers NHL team, the New York Knicks, a bunch of radio and TV networks, and James Dolan's personal obsession, the Rockettes. While you may know the Rockettes from the 5 minutes they have on the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade every year, they're much more than just a song and dance team. They're actually an incredibly sophisticated and vertically integrated business that anyone can take notes on. Every year, the Rockettes' Christmas Spectacular entertains 1 million people over the course of 7 weeks. Given that James Dolan owns the music hall and the group, he's able to retain more of the profit. This type of thinking around owning the act and the venue also influences his sports management strategy. The only difference is that sports management is a bit more complicated. Also, everyone in the sports world hates James Dolan. Like, they really hate him.
I'm so done with James Dolan, who's just a child.
Sell the team! Anything I should sell the team? You know what? Enjoy watching them on TV.
James, no one is having fun at the Garden except the fan who went over to you to say sell the team.
He's not a one-dimensional person the way he's portrayed often, in that he's a complicated guy.
As owner of the Knicks, James has made many errors. One prominent example is the Linsanity saga. Let's jump to 2013. The Knicks are riding high after trying Jeremy Lin on for size. It was a match made in heaven. While off to a rocky start with very little playing time, Lin eventually came into his own and was performing like an all-star for New York. Lin secured his title as a real threat on the court by scoring 38 points against Kobe Bryant's Lakers. The Linsanity era had started. Jeremy Lin was the biggest story in basketball. He was a couch-surfing Harvard grad turned basketball phenom basically overnight. It's a total if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere type of story. New Yorkers loved him, kids loved him, everyone loved him. The Knicks had finally secured a player they could build a lasting dynasty around. So what does James Dolan do? He doesn't sign him. Fans are pissed, and for good reason. It looks like James just doesn't know what he's doing. Since the late 1990s, the Knicks have had over a dozen coaches and constant leadership changes. In the past 15 years, the Knicks have had only 3 playoff appearances. Pretty horrific once you realize they have the highest payroll in the entire league. The Knicks are constantly in controversy, with former players being arrested and James kicking out fans for chanting "sell the team." With this much bad PR, it feels like James is asleep at the wheel with his interest lying elsewhere. To him, sports is just a business. His true passion is in music. As he said in an interview with the Ottawa Citizen in 2013, "I don't shoot basketballs. I don't shoot pucks. I don't install cable in people's homes. Music is a place that goes from my mind to my hands and into my voice directly." So it's no secret Dolan is a big music fan. While his earlier forays into playing professionally never panned out, in 2005 he started a new band named JD and the Straight Shot. Even though the band isn't massive, they've had a surprisingly successful run, opening for bands like the Eagles, the Allman Brothers Band, and ZZ Top. While from the outside, it might seem like just a small pet project for James, he takes it extremely seriously. With a style that's a little bit country and a little bit rock and roll, JD uses the band as a means of venting about his life. A large portion of the band's discography is an open diary for Dolan, where he writes about what's troubling him in his day-to-day life. Take this song, "I Should Have Known." The lyrics are haunting. Here's a sample.
I should have known, I should have known, I should have thrown myself across his tracks, stopped him from these vile attacks. I should have known.
If you couldn't pick up the subtext, the song is about his close friendship with Harvey Weinstein, the producer turned sex offender. This passion for music has driven James Dolan to do many things, and I personally believe it's why he decided to build the Sphere, the ultimate performing arts venue.
It's the glittering new addition to the Las Vegas skyline.
Built for a reported $2.3 billion.
At 366 feet tall, 516 feet wide, it's the world's largest spherical structure.
It's been called virtual reality without the headsets.
While James has had a lot of things given to him based on his last name, the Sphere is uniquely him. James could have just sat around for the rest of his life and collected checks from the Dolan family empire, but he's not. He's taking a lot of risks to build something amazing, and I think that he should be applauded for. But what makes the Sphere unique exactly? While at first glance it looks like a giant LED ball, the engineering and development behind it are much more than meets the eye. The Sphere is a technological marvel. With 700,000 programmable video screens, the Sphere is the largest LED structure ever built. It initially just started as a sketch on a napkin, but now it's complete with 19,000 seats, 167,000 speakers, a structure that's 10 stories high, and a calendar boasting over 600 events. The finished product is the most advanced entertainment venue in the world. After he finished construction, all that was left was to outfit the Sphere with the best entertainment. Enter U2. In fall of 2021, the band was approached to open the $2.3 billion megastructure. At first, they thought it was going to flop. Their own creative director since the 80s, Willie Williams, thought it was a terrible idea. U2 had done massive stadium tours before, but nothing on this scale. If they were going to launch this structure, they were going to need to dive in deep, which is why they opted for a full-on residency at the Sphere rather than just a single show. While this was a risky bet, it paid off in full. With the help of viral clips and constant media buzz, the residency is projected to pull in around $270 million over 18 dates. While that's a significant amount of money, it's nowhere near the amount necessary to get in the green after all the massive capital expenditures. Dolan had to take a page out of the Teleguide playbook and opt for advertising dollars. When you have the most eye-catching structure in the world, you get to name your price. To advertise for just one day on the Sphere, you have to fork over $450,000. This covers working with MSG's 300+ designers and is estimated to bring in 4.7 million daily impressions across in-person and social media views. Some products are perfect for advertising on the Sphere. Basically, if you sell a spherical product, like something related to tennis, basketball, etc., it's going to go viral. This extra monetization angle is critical to making the extremely expensive investment in building the Sphere pay off. While what you're personally working on may not be as large as the Sphere, there are still actionable lessons from the Dolan family that you can bring into your own life and business. Number one, the monopoly thesis. There are many ways to build a monopoly. You can have proprietary technology, elite branding, network effects, economies of scale, or regulatory capture. After Chuck Dolan sold off Sterling Information to Time Warner, he was given a golden opportunity to be the only cable provider in New York and Long Island. He chose the path of regulatory capture, understanding its power from his tie-ups at Sterling. This lesson extends to the Sphere. The Sphere is a combination of proprietary technology and elite branding. Right now, there's nothing else like it in the world. Until there is, James Dolan has the biggest attention grabber in the world. Building a direct copy would feel like a knockoff, and in a world of unlimited online content, people are starting to pay more for real-world experiences, which are by definition scarce. Number two, vertical integration captures untapped value. The Rockettes and Radio City Music Hall have a beautiful synergy. Since the Dolans own both, they are able to capture even more value than if the Rockettes were a touring group. James is already building this into his strategy for the Sphere by developing custom content that he fully owns that can play in the Sphere forever. Number three, never bet against someone with a chip on their shoulder. James has always had a reluctance to speak to the media. They smear him, call him a rich kid, and talk on and on about his inherited wealth. While any other silver-spooned brat would slink off to the French Alps and spend the rest of their life in obscurity, James took this hate and turned it into fuel. To envision and pull off the Sphere is a massive feat. I'd hate to be competing with him. If after learning all this about James Dolan, you have mixed feelings about him, I don't blame you. It's easy to see him as pompous, aggressive, and petulant. You might be right, but there's one thing that's objectively true. James had a bold and original idea for how entertainment should be experienced and chased it down to make it come true. He built a massively ambitious structure that captured the world's attention, and he did it extremely quickly. It's felt impossible to build new things in the real world for decades now, and even though the Sphere is basically just a concert venue, it's a step in the right direction. Thanks for watching.